Dragon Ball as a whole is one of my favorite overall franchises, and by far my favorite anime. The story of Son Goku from child to an adult was one of the most amazing adventures that I'd ever witnessed. As you know, there are currently 4 Dragon Ball series: Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, and the side story, Dragon Ball GT. Now, I do like all of these series a lot, but there are definitely some that I like more than the others. Before I get into the rankings, I do want to remind you guys that this is my subjective opinion overall, and I can't be wrong because it's my opinion.
How do you know what's good for me? That's my opinion!
But how would you guys rank these? And let me know down below in the comments. Rank your favorite Dragon Ball series from worst to best. Now, since there's only 4 entries in this ranking, I'll get to talk a lot more about each series a bit more. So, I also want to say that this is kind of a composite of an anime and the manga. This is not specifically the Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z manga. It is the whole thing, so it's both of them combined as one thing. So let's just get into this ranking, starting with my least favorites in the franchise. Dragon Ball GT. Now, I do need to reiterate that just because I put this series at last place in no way means that I hate it. In fact, I actually quite like GT overall. The good things about GT, for one, are great villains, especially Baby. I love the aspect of the Suforians getting revenge on the Saiyans, and the villain Baby was the perfect idea. His motivations, powers, and actions all were great. Taking over the Earth as well as the Prince of the Saiyans, Vegeta, what better revenge than stealing the body of the prince of the race who murdered your species? Also, the coolest concept for a villain ever in my opinion is the Shadow Dragons. Again, showing that past actions have future consequences was great. This shows that the Dragon Balls were never supposed to be used as often as they were, and they were used that much because Bulma had the Dragon Radar. A few more awesome things about this series before I get into the bad is that Super Saiyan 4 is amazing. In my opinion, it is the coolest looking and most badass form that Goku has ever attained. Also, the lore behind it of taming the inner beast to reach maximum potential was just something that I heavily prefer over Super's forms where Saiyans holding hands and then a god appears. Also, seeing a Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta was such a fanboy moment for me. That was so epic. After seeing Vegito in Dragon Ball Z, I thought it was the coolest thing, and I'd always wondered what it would be like if Goku and Vegeta did the fusion dance instead. GT was pretty epic at points, but it also had some downfalls. And that started with Goku becoming a kid again. Now honestly, for a saga or two, it wouldn't have been that bad to have Goku be a kid, but for the series overall, it was just annoying and it was pointless. Now, a lot of people try and say, well, it was just a way to power down Goku. But Goku's base form alone was stronger than even Rildo, who he himself was likely even stronger than Buhan, the strongest villain in Dragon Ball Z. Even the guides state that Goku never lost power, just a lot of his stamina. So, in my opinion, it was just a pointless move. Also, the first saga was absolutely abysmal. It was boring, it tried to be funny and didn't succeed.
Don't forget to smile! Don't forget to smile! What?
Tried to combine Dragon Ball Z and the original Dragon Ball into one show, and it did not work. It had characters holding back transformations where if they immediately just went Super Saiyan, then they would have succeeded earlier. And also, the Black Star Dragon Ball saga, it did end decently well with the introduction of the Sigma Force and General Rildo on planet M2, but still, no great ending could salvage what this series was built off of. Also, the whole Black Star Dragon Balls, that did not make any sense and it was just dumb. Why weren't they detected on the Dragon Radar before if they were detected by the Pilaf gang? Also, there is an 8-episode saga. Yes, an 8-episode saga. The Super 17 saga was only 8 episodes, and honestly, that's just too low in my opinion to cover a whole saga and a story. In fact, it seems that if The Baby Saga and the Super 17 Saga should be combined to be its own saga. And again, speaking of the first 3 sagas, Dr. Mew was a villain, technically, in all 3. Yes, 3 consecutive sagas. He was on M2 with Roldo, and the first run-in with Baby. He was also the one who created Baby, which was the main villain for his own saga. And then he helped Dr. Gero create Super 17 in the next saga after that. Yeah, that's just a bit too much for me. Also, one main underlying downfall of the series was Toriyama wasn't very involved. Now, Toriyama did approve of GT to be created, and he did help a bit, but with no GT manga ever being created, there was no source material for Toei Animation to base their show off of, which meant they had to create the show for themselves. Toriyama being more involved likely could have increased the quality of the show overall, and my final complaint with GT is that the show was only 64 episodes long, less than half the size of the next shortest show in the franchise, Dragon Ball Super, which had 131 episodes. So these are the reasons why I put GT as the worst show in the Dragon Ball franchise. But let's get into the next ranking on this list, Dragon Ball Super. Dragon Ball Super was a massive hype train for me. Having Dragon Ball back in my life was amazing. New villains, kinda, heroes, and Super Saiyan forms. This show brought back Dragon Ball in the spotlight, and it was something that kept me entertained every single Saturday. Well, most Saturdays, I guess. Despite the amazingness of Super, it is something that I can now look back on and fully get what I think about the series as a whole. And man, there are a lot of amazing things, but also a lot of very, very poor things. So first let's talk about some of the good things, and that is the good forms. Super Saiyan God, Blue Kaioken, Blue Evolution, Ultra Instinct Omen, and Mastered Ultra Instinct. Thought that all these new forms introduced were quite entertaining and visually appealing. They were all powerful and just epic to see on screen. The new gods and new universes introduced vastly increased the size of the Dragon Ball universe in such a big way, adding in 11 new universes along with some of their characters and all their gods and angels. Introducing a new god hierarchy with Zeno, the Omni King, and the Grand Priest, it was pretty interesting. Seeing Goku's path throughout this series as he had tried to attain and surpass the powers of the gods was really cool to watch. Goku's new master Whis is one of the most interesting, as Whis is like a magician who is also the strongest in the universe. And the appeal to the new Ultra Instinct form was awesome, as it showed it wasn't just a power boost, but a new way of sensing your opponent and a new way of fighting. The Goku Black arc brought in a brand new amazing villain, Goku Black and Zamasu, who were basically the same thing, as well as bringing back one of my favorite characters, Future Trunks. And seeing the amazing power of Vegeta Blue was something I will never forget. And the climax of the series, the Tournament of Power, that was amazing too. A lot of the fights in there were great, especially the Goku vs Jiren fights, and Hit vs Jiren, Vegeta vs Toppo, Goku vs Kefla, and then the final Goku vs Jiren fight. Now despite the amazing moments we got out of Super, there are many things that I just don't like. Starting with the beginning, and that is the Battle of the Gods and the Revival of F films being rehashed into their own 14-episode sagas. This meant that for the first 6 months of Super's run, we would be getting small cuts of the movies every single week that we had just seen. And worst of all, at least in my opinion, these sagas as a whole are less entertaining than the actual movies, and could have been compacted into many less episodes, maybe instead of 14 episodes per, maybe 10, 9, but it could definitely have been way less than 14. Also, the thing is that means that 28 episodes, or over 20% of the entire Dragon Ball Super series, is rehashed content. The lack of villains in the series was also very disappointing, as the only true new villain was Zamasu. The only other villain in the show was Frieza back yet again. For me, having a great new villain is very important when watching something like Dragon Ball. And with that not being in there, and most of the people being antagonists and not villains, really made the show go down for me when it really could have been higher on this list. And some of the new forms like Super Saiyan Rage were not explained very well at all and didn't make sense, and also directly contradicted Super's own manga. But despite all of these, one of the most annoying things about the series is the random power-up that characters get. Frieza trains for 4 months and he is able to catch up to a Goku who had been training for over 10 years since his fight with Frieza. Also, Android 17 being on a par with Super Saiyan Blue Goku, if not stronger, out of nowhere was also weird. Now I know that it was explained that Frieza was a prodigy and that 17 had been training for all of those years since the Cell Saga, but seeing such power boost was still too surprising and felt too out of the blue, and I believe that they could have been explained much better in the show. So this is why I put Dragon Ball Super at number 3, but let's get into the next ranking on this list, number 2, and that is Dragon Ball. So, Dragon Ball was actually the second series I watched. I actually watched and read Dragon Ball Z first, because that was what I was introduced to first, but I'll get that into the next ranking. But Dragon Ball is such an amazing story from beginning to end. It is an adventure story that also has a lot of great action scenes in it. So, I love the adventure, and I think that Dragon Ball, the OG Dragon Ball, has the best story from beginning to end out of all of the Dragon Ball series. I love the tournaments. The tournament fights were amazing to read and watch. Demon King Piccolo and Piccolo Jr. were great villains and great fights. And it was a very good choreographed series from what I can see. And Goku as a kid in the OG Dragon Ball, he's a great character. Now, I don't really like the character of Kid Goku from GT because I feel like they're a bit different. But still, seeing Dragon Ball was really cool, but honestly, it would have been better for me to watch the original Dragon Ball and then Dragon Ball Z, because it just flows better to watch it from that to that. You don't need to watch Dragon Ball to have to watch Dragon Ball Z, but it would be better that way. And also, in my opinion, it's better not knowing Goku's backstory of him being a Saiyan when you watch the original Dragon Ball. But still, going back and watching it, it's amazing. And the manga of Dragon Ball is great. It is so good. I've read it so many times, and it is really a very, very funny show. It's got the best story. It's the funniest iteration of all of them. And although people do kind of knock it for not having as epic of fights as Dragon Ball Z in the later series, its fights are still amazing. They're choreographed very well. The story behind the fights are great, and yes, their power is nowhere near the powers of the characters in the later series, but they're still very strong. I mean, they are extremely strong characters, superhuman level fighters, and it's great to watch, it's great to read and look at the panels, seeing the fights, and I mean, it's super close to being number 1. It's a great series. But back to my final ranking, the number 1 spot, and that of course, you know, has to be Dragon Ball Z. I actually was introduced to Dragon Ball Z not through the manga, not through the anime, but through a movie. My dad, he wasn't working at the time, it was the weekend, and I was home and my mom wasn't home, and we wanted to watch something together, and he asked what I wanted to watch, and I said I wanted to watch Yu-Gi-Oh! There was none on TV, so he went to Blockbuster to try and get like several episodes on the VHS tape, bring it so we could watch it together, and Blockbuster said they did not have any copies of Yu-Gi-Oh! And then my dad asked what would be the next best thing that is similar, and the guy working there, thank God, thank you so much, man, he's like, oh, Dragon Ball Z, here's this. And he gives me the first Cooler movie, The Revenge of Cooler, and I mean, going in, that was just a great movie. You didn't need to really watch the previous, like, any of Dragon Ball Z. I, like, kind of understood what was going on. It was really cool, and I watched that movie over and over and over again, and I thought it was amazing. The villain, Cooler, was sick. Super Saiyan. Goku bring that bird back to life. Cooler's henchman. It was so cool. And then my dad, the next weekend, my dad returned the next week and surprised me and came back with the sequel to the Cooler movie, where I thought that was amazing as well. Seeing Cooler like that was crazy. Seeing 2 Super Saiyans was awesome. And then, by luck, a few weeks later, I was at the library was going through looking around, because I liked to read a lot back when I was that young. I think I was about in 2nd or 3rd grade when I got introduced to Dragon Ball, and I saw the Dragon Ball Z manga sitting in there, and so basically I was piecing together the entire Dragon Ball story, because the library never really had all of the mangas at once, it had random parts, but eventually about a year later, after I'd already read all the Dragon Ball Z manga, and also watched all the Dragon Ball Z movies through renting them at Blockbuster, I had found somebody who thankfully uploaded every single episode of Dragon Ball Z onto YouTube. He basically uploaded every single episode into 3 parts, so that was lots of videos, but going through and watching Dragon Ball Z was amazing. I mean, I think that all of the villains in Dragon Ball Z are amazing. The only subpar villain is Boo, but still, he's still a good villain. And so, learning that Goku was a Saiyan, that he was sent to Earth to destroy it, and then Goku's brother Raditz coming, but now, I didn't get to really experience the beginning of Dragon Ball Z as a complete, because I didn't see, when I first saw Goku and Piccolo fight Raditz, I didn't get to see Goku and Piccolo fight each other in Dragon Ball. But when you go and watch that fight and see that this is Goku and Piccolo, the 2 strongest people on Earth, and this is them 5 years after original Dragon Ball, where they're much stronger, and even them teamed up couldn't do anything to Raditz, showing how strong the Saiyans were and how much business they meant. They meant business. You had to take them seriously. And then when Raditz was defeated and Goku was killed, we find out, oh, 2 Saiyans, each far more powerful than Raditz, are gonna be there in a year. So we know shit is going down. And Vegeta, which is my favorite character, him as a villain starting off was amazing. And then you could see in the Namek saga, over the course of it, him becoming a good guy again and again and again. By the time of the end of the Buu saga, where he's basically a good guy, sacrificed himself to try and kill Buu and save everybody else. This show just was epic. I mean, there was planets being destroyed, threats of the solar system being destroyed, maybe even the whole galaxy being destroyed by Buu. I mean, it was awesome. And then fusion, and then Majin Buu could absorb people. This was just something that's so epic that I saw. And now when I compare it to the other series, it doesn't have the best story. I think it has the best story, 2nd place behind OG Dragon Ball. It's funny, not as funny as OG Dragon Ball, and its fight scenes were amazing, and it was very epic, and it had, in my opinion, better villains than Dragon Ball. There's that, but also just the nostalgia of Dragon Ball Z is probably why I might have it at number 1. Actually, you know what, even if I take out nostalgia, I'd probably still put Dragon Ball Z at number 1, but I mean, I can't really know that. It's hard to take nostalgia out of an opinion, but anyways, that's my list. Number 4, Dragon Ball GT. Number 3, Dragon Ball Super. Number 2, Dragon Ball. And number 1, Dragon Ball Z. Such an amazing franchise, and who knows, maybe in a year, 2 years, I'll be updating this list and adding in the brand new Dragon Ball series if we ever get one, which I am hoping for. But anyways, guys, please do leave a like if you enjoyed. Comment down below, tell me your list from worst to best, and also subscribe, like, turn on notifications if you want to see more of my videos, join my Discord, and follow me on Twitter. And thanks to all of my Patreon supporters. And I would give a huge thanks to all of my Patreon supporters. So my Super Saiyans is Hodag Hunter, and my Super Saiyan 2s, Darius, Israel Flores, Locke, Anime Paradox, and Mystic Ghoul. And also, thanks to my Super Saiyan 3s, Scotland Serenity, Diraj Payton, Sin Overlord, and Griffin Jacob. Thank you guys so much for all the support. It really does mean a lot, and I hope you guys all have an amazing day. Peace out.